provide context to people, we were talking about FI. Darryl was talking about how, it's hard for people to sense his FI inferior because he's often monotone. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the gist of what you're saying. And he said it's hard for other people to detect that he's feeling emotions. And I said, I'm able to detect ENTJ's emotions. I can actually detect that. It's sort of this undercurrent, this undertone that's sort of always there. So I asked, okay, are these emotions often positive or negative? Because FI inferior is in the negative pessimistic slot. And he said, do you want to repeat what you said just now?
So yeah, we talked about it, and I said, I wouldn't say that it's negative or positive. It's the feeling. It's what I would say tends to be negative is it can sometimes get very overwhelming in both good and bad ways, right? One, it's actually funny. So it's a thing I've noticed about FI inferior. So I have a little cousin who's an ESTJ. I'm an ENTJ, and I've talked to other ENTJs, and they all say the same thing. When we were children, we used to cry a lot. Like I was the biggest crybaby. And it's because we really don't have an understanding at that age of how to properly feel something without just full-fledged expression. And so, yeah, we were crybabies. That's just to give a little bit of context of why I say we feel a lot. We can feel we can feel too much. So sometimes it's like, instead of feeling too much, I choose not to feel anything at all.
I find that really interesting. I find that there are a lot of parallels between both of us because there's things that you said that I resonate with that I didn't think that I would. So, for example, I'm often pretty monotone in my expression. Maybe not now. I'm trying to gesticulate a bit more on a live stream, but for the most part, people do not find me very emotionally expressive. I say, oh, that's okay. That's something that's kind of similar between us. And the thing that you said about feeling more extreme between emotions is interesting because when I talk to people with higher feeling functions in their slots, I feel like they have a much more granular view of emotions, almost like they can quantify their emotion to like 1 decimal point or 2 decimal points. And I feel like I can only quantify my emotions as like 0 or 1. And the way that you described FI inferior just now was the way that I feel about my FE inferior. And I said, oh, that's kind of interesting. I think that's, so I thought that you may actually feel a much deeper sense of emotion, but I think it may also be related to the location of the slot. So it seems that both of us experience more extreme emotions. Where, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's how it tends to work. Granted, I would say from my standpoint, exactly what you said as far as the decimal, when you said the decimal points, that was perfect, right? I try and stay within that small decimal because I feel everything from one end to the other all the time. And it's like, I know how I feel that day. I'm very in tune with my emotions in that aspect. What I'm not in tune with is when it gets past that, how I can sort of stay rational. Like I try as hard as I can to stay as a rational person. I try and think very rationally about things. Even when I'm upset, I try and think very rationally. So, I don't want to ever get to a point where I lose rational thought from emotion, because I believe that everyone's actions, um, you know, regardless of if you were emotionally driven or mentally driven, your actions are still your actions. So you're still held accountable for them. So I think that's my main reasoning for trying to stay very monotone, I guess would be the best word.
I guess I'm curious about your relationship with emotions. Do you feel as though emotions have like gotten you into trouble in your life and that's why you want to like be much more rational about your actions?
No, no, I think the reason, I think for me, I guess from an FE demon standpoint, I think emotions are very important. Like they're pretty much the cornerstone of what makes a person a person. Um, it's just from my viewpoint, emotions can be easily manipulated, and not only can they be easily manipulated, but they can also bring you out of character. And when you're brought out of character and easily manipulated, then you you struggle. I mean, you can easily struggle with self. And so for me to maintain self, it's like I need to maintain my rational thought, because then I know who I am, why I'm doing what I'm doing. If I lose that, then it's a free for all.
If people do not want your SE inferior, if people reject it, will your FI get upset?
Oh, like if someone doesn't want my SE child, will my FI get upset? FI inferior
Sure,
get
yes,
upset?
that's
Yeah, yeah.
SE child. If people don't like your SE,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. Actually, yes, a lot. Um, that is probably from those who are looking to be in a relationship with an ENTJ, that is probably the biggest um minefield. Because what tends to happen is, from our viewpoint, it's like, I want to give you an experience. I can care less about my experience. Like, I mean, if the only time I really do care about my experience is if I just know I'm not having a good time. But oftentimes, really, I'm okay with doing whatever. Um, so most of the time, I kind of look to the other person to say, hey, are you having a good time? Or can I give you this? Can I get you this gift? I like to show my I like to show my emotion through actions. So if a person is like, oh, I don't want to do that, or um, or this is too much for me, I take that very, like personal. Not saying I might be mad at you, I might be mad at me, because I want to make sure that I'm giving a person a good experience, because SE Child just wants to give everybody a good experience.
Who are the types that typically make your child unhappy? Like, which are the types that tend to do that?
Ironically, the Alpha Quadrant the most. And the
Alpha
reason
quadrant. Nice.
why, actually, and I think this is a good thing though. So I mean, I'm a person who still believes in the theory of contrast, right? And conflict. We can't grow without conflict. And so if you think of how the, if you think about how cognitive synchronicity works, a lot of the time the alpha quadrant, especially like ESFJs or ISFJs, they really are selfish when it comes to their experience. They hate when you say that. They really like don't call them selfish, but they are very selfish when it comes to their experience. And um, what tends to happen is they don't know that they don't see it in a way of, oh, this person's giving me an experience. They kind of see it as kind of like an expectation of, this is what I want to do, and you're supposed to provide it.
I see.
And that can be a little hard, especially from an ENTJ standpoint, because from our point of view, we don't care if you're happy. Like, we don't really care. We don't care if you enjoy. I mean, all we do is care that you enjoy what we did for you. So if I go out of my way to, put up an entire Christmas tree, and I
Mm-hmm.
start doing, putting the ornaments on and things like that, and you make a slight remark about how you didn't like it, or how,
Mm-hmm.
something wasn't happening, it hits really hard, because it's like, what, that's
So
kind of
what I'm
selfish.
curious about, do you think that your SE child is able to reach up and satisfy that SI hero, do you think it has to reach, and you sort of have to like push yourself a little bit just to reach those expectations?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I also think that that's one of the interesting things about the bronze pair is it does bring a little bit of humility, because everyone's hero function is reckless, right? In some capacity. And so from like an SE child to a SI hero, I have to constantly remind her that you can be really reckless with your hero, but in the same vein, I have to remember my T. I can give information like nobody's business. I can explain something like it's nobody's business, and sometimes TI child is just like, whoa, this is too much. I can't keep up. So it's a kind of a back and forth.
That's okay. TI hero sometimes has a hard time keeping up with TI hero too. But cognitively, we're best equipped for that, I suppose.
Oh, okay. So Thomas wanted to know, how are ISFJs selfish? Um, so I won't say just ISFJs, but everybody's selfish in some way, shape, or form, right? And for them, the reason why they're selfish is that they can often be very selfish with their experiences, to the point where they, like, it might be a group of people and they will not, what's the best way to put it? What's the best way to put this? They don't know how to turn SI off sometimes, where they're just like, let's keep going, let's keep going. And everybody else is like completely exhausted. Things like hiking, skydiving. ISFJs love doing things that are really, can be really extreme. Roller coasters. I had to put, for my girlfriend, I had to put one boundary. Like, I love roller coasters, but I do not like lack of G-force. So I told her I'm not riding anything that's a free fall roller coaster. I'm not doing any Supermans or anything that drops you. And she still to this day like makes fun of me for not being able to do that. And I'm like, I can ride every single roller coaster in the park. I just don't want to get dropped, and you still make fun of me. That's what I mean when I say she can be a little selfish.
And I guess you've noticed that with ISTJs too, if you've had experience with that, I'm guessing.
Interestingly enough, it's the complete opposite with ISTJs. They can take all of those experiences. They just don't like to. I don't know why. They're very hard into their comfort zone, which is completely different from ISFJs, who are very, give me more experience, give me more experience.
Interesting. So someone says, who's this? My INFP SI child friend will lose interest if the environment is not there. So I suppose that's true. I can relate to that. But I guess it's easier for you, right? If you're trying to entertain a SI child or SI inferior, I mean, do you feel like it's much easier, and like, do you think it's a much better synchronous experience that way?
Yeah, you know what I think it's interesting, and maybe you might, I don't know if you've spent time with like a SE child, like an ENTJ or ENFJ, but for me, my experience with INTPs is that you guys don't need much to be happy, like to enjoy an experience. You don't need much at all.
I think we can entertain ourselves, as in we're very self-sufficient. So if we needed to entertain ourselves, that's fine. And like the additional stimulus that ENTJs provide is the cherry on top of life. What do ENTJs provide, or ENFJs for that matter? Because I've had long-term interactions with ENTJs and ENFJs at various points in my life, and I really like it when SE child like takes the SI child out somewhere, because I can entertain myself in my own living room, office, whatever. But I'm not gonna go out to experience something in the city on my own. Maybe once in a while on my own. But like when an SE child person does that, that's like great. And it's like I'm assuming that isn't even that much of a burden or that much of a cost for SE Child to do this. Just like, it's a nice thing to do. I think that sort of answers the question, but yeah.
You answered it very well, because I've through my experience with like an INTP, it's like, from my view, for the person who asked, it's like I can do either the bare minimum to entertain or the most to entertain, and they will enjoy it either way. And it's very fun, because sometimes it's like, especially from SE Child standpoint, we want to give people such good experiences all the time that we just get really exhausted doing it, right? Like, sometimes I don't like throwing parties, because I enjoy throwing parties, but after I'm done throwing a party, it's just like, oh my God, that was so exhausting. Whereas like I have ESFP friends, love it. They can do it all day, all night. It doesn't bother them. And I feel like with lower SI users, it comes off a lot more genuine, because I feel like you would think, oh, they're taking the time out of their day to give me an experience, but I really didn't need it. But I enjoy it anyway. I think that's how it comes off.
That's nice. I really like how sometimes people describe the child function as like the weekend function. It's like the function you use on a Saturday or a Sunday. You go out and have a party or something, which is very interesting. Anyways, we are progressing upwards in the function stack. We've talked about feelings just now. I really didn't like how that sounded, like we were talking about our feelings. Anyway, we were talking about we were talking
it's
about
fine. No, it's fine. We were talking about feelings. It's important to talk about your feelings, guys. Trust me.
Maybe. And then we were talking about a child function just now, and now maybe if you think it makes sense, maybe the parent function is the next logical progression to go from here.
Yeah. I like that.
So NI, the description of NI that I hear is like, you forecast your life in 5-year plans. You have a 5-year plan, annual plan for your life. Would you say that is true?
Yeah. So yes, like that's the cliche though, right? So here's how I would describe NI parent. NI parent is, think of that mind state of, how is this going to affect me? And that's how NI parent really works. Oftentimes I know exactly what's going to happen, right? And I've posted before that extroverted intuition knows what can happen and all the possibilities, whereas NI knows exactly what will happen based on the actual, evidence and, people involved in every single factor. And from my viewpoint, I can plan out if I really wanted to, I could plan out everything from, I'm 26, about to be 27, to 55. I don't do it. And the reason, and I think one of the reasons why is because I have matured more with my NI to realizing spending so much time trying to plan out your future often leaves you not enjoying your future when it actually gets there. Because what tends to happen is you become so obsessed with the next move, you forget to think about what's happening today.
So I feel that's a very good response to somebody who commented just now, who said, NI parent is so hardcore compared to NI dom. And I think your response was perfect, because what you basically said just now is that you don't want to plan that far ahead, because that's just too much, planning your entire life ahead. But there's a more interesting comment about NI parents. Somebody says, NI parent users are cheaters in life as far as I am concerned, as long as it is developed. What's your
Yeah.
response to that?
So let's put it this way. Having NI parent is like going on life through easy mode. If you're playing games, I put it on easy mode. And the reason why it's on easy mode is because all I do is evaluate what other people did, see if it worked, see why it worked, and then make the decision on if I want to do it or not.
Do you feel that sort of like learning from the lessons of others around you as opposed to doing trial and error on your own?
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. That's I think that's actually both T, E, and NI, because you're basically able to take all this knowledge of the world and then figure out, okay, what are the mistakes that other people have made? How do I not make those mistakes? Just don't do what all these other people are doing, and then go down the path based on, historically, or like what is best practice in society right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting because ENFJs do the same thing, but not from the standpoint of like TE, right? So from my viewpoint, it's like, let me pick the most rational move forward.
Mm-hmm.
ENFJs, I had an ENFJ boss. We didn't really get along very well, but she was so different because the way the ENFJs, from my experience, did it was they kind of put together the collective to help everybody go forward, including themselves.
I mean, that must be really interesting working with a FE Dom, especially if you're a FE Demon, I suppose. That must have been an interesting experience. Do you think such a relationship is more prone to like conflict or growth?
I don't necessarily think it's a conflict or growth conversation because that depends on the individuals, right? So some people can thrive, some people might, argue. What I think tends to happen is it's really conflicting.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a really conflicting view because it's almost like my viewpoint is what's the best move forward, and her viewpoint is what's the right move forward, and they're both valid. Like, it's not necessarily one or the other is wrong. It's just when you have to sit down and you have to make a plan, that plan tends to not look the same. And both people are correct on their plan, it's just not the same. And so it takes a lot of humility, personally, to be able to say, you know what, maybe this isn't the best move forward, but you're right. It is the right move forward. Sometimes you don't want to isolate people. Sometimes you do want to bring in more individuals. So it can be conflicting.
That's really interesting. That actually ties very well into one of the comments. My ENFJ sister and I debate about futures a lot. She wants the best for me and pushes me towards a future I don't even want as and I don't. So I think that this person that posted is an INTJ, which is really interesting because I guess the ENFJ proposes NI advice, not NE advice. So I guess it would not work well for NI Dom in that case. But
no, NI Dom to NI parent just doesn't work well together anyway, whether it's INTJs or like to INTJs to ENTJs or ENFJs to INFJs or
ENFJ and INTJ is a supervisor-supervisee relationship, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think ENTJ and INFJ is a supervisory relationship. So I think there's some weirdness that goes on there.
I was gonna say, so from an NE parent standpoint, I would want to know where is, because I saw this. It was funny. I actually watched an anime, and I thought maybe this is exactly how NE works. And basically, it was this INTP, and he went through life, and he like constantly was making little external like visions, and he was kind of seeing little like cartoons and things, but he used it very responsibly. And I wanted to know, how does your NE parent work?
Okay, so the way that any parent works is on a smaller scale. What do I mean by on a smaller scale? Basically, if you give me a problem, suppose the problem is my car broke down. Any parent is the troubleshooting function, because it pairs to TI, right? So TI does all the analysis of, okay, my car is broken. What are all the issues that's going on with my car? What can I do? Do I have my AAA card? Can I call it AAA? What time is it? How much battery is left on my phone? How much battery is left in my car? And see, I'm literally like spinning out all the possibilities in my head, like right now. Do I have a spare tire? Do I have a spare wrench? Where am I in the road? Basically spinning out all these possibilities. And then the TI is basically like filtering down, like, this is no good, this is no good, this is no good, and then getting to a solution. So it works on a smaller scale. So it's like any problem. It's like, I have guests that are coming to eat dinner in an hour. How can I get this thing done? And then any parent gets there's a thrill of meeting a deadline. There's that thrill. But the thing is that any parent knows it can handle, if it has enough experience, it can handle it because it can spin out the possibilities. I can spin like, okay, the 3 dishes we have to make. Okay, this takes 20 minutes, this takes 10 minutes, this takes 5 minutes. All right, let's do the time allocation here. Let's whip up all the groceries that I have in the fridge. How can I split this down and do this in a super efficient way? And it's like constraint optimization, resource optimization, and allocation, like doing that like really fast. And like it's extremely enjoyable to me, that whole process. But I want to contrast this to any parent. So ENTPs or ENFPs, they have a much greater vision for the future. So for example, like Steve Jobs, he's able to spin out the vision for what Apple is, what the company is. What does Apple stand for? It stands for excellence in terms of product. It stands for people that thought differently and pushed the boundaries. And those are like much larger visions that like connect with humans and like, you know, get people drawn in to like a much larger vision. But that is the contrast that I see between any hero and any parent. Any parents,
interesting. Yeah. Actually, because I know I was watching an interview of Mr. Kanye West, who is any hero, and he was basically explaining, like, for him, he said, I'm the person, if you hand me a dinosaur bone, one bone, I can envision the entire dinosaur. And I was like, is that how any works?
Yeah.
And I was so super interested.
I mean, that is how any works, but I want to now contextualize into the context of NI parent. So oftentimes when I talk to ENTJs and ENFJs, this is something I hear very often. They often have I wouldn't say a problem, but they're more like talking about like their future, like, oh, you know, I'm thinking about doing this, I'm thinking about switching my job, or, you know, I'm thinking about doing this, or thinking of doing that. And they're not directly asking me, but the implication behind what they're saying is, okay, what do you think of this? And I'm often offering possibilities of, well, you know, now's not a great time to change your job because maybe the economy is not great right now, or, you know, inflation, you know, you might want to take care of that, or, you know, you might want to secure a new job first before quitting your current job. And I'm kind of laying out the possibilities for them about, like, how do I say this? NE is about coming up with the unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
Or the known unknowns, I suppose. I'm making the unknowns known now. So, you know, NI kind of is really focused, and they really want that one thing. And and as any parent, I'm glad to help NI parent, like, because it gives me like that energy to like spin my views, like spin out ideas for NI parent. I don't know whether they take that advice. I honestly have no idea whether they actually take that advice, but it's like a fun brainstorming activity for me. So
no, that's interesting, because I find that very, maybe it's because I didn't have that many any users in my life, right? Or if I did, they were very low any. Like I have a lot of ISTJs in my family, and a lot of and then I knew a lot of ISFJs. But I feel like for me, I had to do that on my own for so long that it kind of became more of a second nature, but not in the way you described it. Like what you described, I understand to the T, because I do it on a very micro level.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so for me, right, if my car was to break down, you went through all of those scenarios. I literally just pinpointed it down to like, okay, I can only go through like 4. So if one of these 4 don't work, we're gonna make it work. Like, one of these 4 will work because I'm gonna make it work. And I guess that's how NI contrasts with like any critic.
Okay, I see. So you say that you would probably generate 4 possibilities, and you would like pick the best one, and like and sort of devote your efforts to executing that one thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of do it the opposite way, where it's you have 10 okay, maybe 7, 6 possibilities. I sort of trying each one out a little here, and I get data. Okay, this one might work because I try it. Like, I try it a little bit, and I get feedback from the world. So I try this thing, and it's like, will it work? Will it not work? And I get a little bit more data, and I'll probably converge on some one idea. But once I converge on that one idea, the fun is gone, and the fun is gone now. But obviously, in scenarios where it's like the car is broken, obviously you have to fix the car. You can't just abandon it. But that's that's basically how it sort of works.
No, I mean, literally the complete opposite for me, because it's the same thing. The fun is so annoying. Like, it's so annoying to think of multiple possibilities. But for me, it's like, if I want to do something, it's going to get done. Like, especially if I enjoy it, it's going to get done. Yeah.
But for TE, are TE users fast readers? Because it appears to me that TE readers can read things very fast. And I'm just like, how did you read that so fast? Did you actually understand that? Am I just a slow reader? What's going on?
No.
What are your thoughts on that?
TE hero is like this. Here's the best way to put it. If I am a sponge and I absorb information so fast, and it's not so much that I comprehend the information. I want you to comprehend it and then explain it to me. And then at your explanation, I got it. So I always say, I know a little about a lot of things. I don't know a lot about little things. I know a little about a lot of things. So I take the bare minimum understanding of something, but I can explain it very well across the board of a vast amount of things.
I see. So, but I suppose that implicitly answers the question that you are a fast reader, but you're kind of reading in a very effective way to grasp the big picture of how things work and explaining that big picture.
Yeah.
I feel like, the modern society, basically modern society is very fast paced, and it makes it very difficult to understand things in depth. So, for example, let me give you an example of what is TI reading. I'm mostly an information sponge, but what I do is, for example, if I'm reading a patent application, I go to Google, patents.google.com, and I'm reading a patent for an invention. I want to understand everything. I want to go through all the references and be like, can I construct in my head a mental model of how this device works? And if there's a hole, I'm just not satisfied. And if I'm working with the movement type, and this is very interesting, but I feel like most of the people that I interact with in life are movement types. They will just push me to be like, okay, you know enough, 80% of the thing. It's time to move on, and let's execute this thing, and let's just go with the flow. That is not my preference. But I would actually say it's good for control types and movement types to work with each other because they average each other's energies out. Because I think if you just left me to my own devices, I'll spend 10 years doing something that's obviously extreme and not great. But yeah, that's my perspective. I want to know every detail. I want to go through all the references to understand things in depth as much as I can. And oftentimes, am I too slow? And then when I talk to somebody else, I realize that I seem to have a slightly more in-depth understanding than what other people have. I'm like, oh, I just find that very interesting.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it seems to just be a preference.
So that's interesting, right? So at my job, right? So I'm an economic development planner, right? And so oftentimes I found that most people have a hard time grasping what I do. And I'm like, for me, it's so simple because to me, I just kind of think of economic development as, I don't know if you know the game Civilization, where you just kind of, yeah. So it's literally just civilization. Like across the board, I put everything in the right spot so that the world can work. But that's a very top-down view. So from the way it sounds for you, it's like you would rather go and take it from the ground level and really understand it from and kind of go up with it. Like you want to know every single detail of how this would, how this process works, why this works, why that works, why this works, why that works, all the way up until you get to where I would, to where you have such a good understanding, you would be able to almost explain the entire civilization itself in almost like a thesaurus. I mean, almost like it's a encyclopedia.
Yeah, that's my preference, but I find that that fulfills the role of kind of an advisor or a background type, because I don't think it makes sense for somebody that's in a more, I suppose, high-level executive position to do all of that depth. That's not good, because you need speed and decisiveness in your position, right? And like working with maybe 80% of the knowledge or whatever is good enough, and it's probably optimal to just go with like 80% or whatever of the information.
But
I'm sort of
that's interesting.
holes, basically.
That's interesting because I agree with you in premise, but I kind of find myself wanting to always know more, right? But I just don't have the time to do that. Like I can't, like for example, if someone's talking to me about, I'm from Houston, so we're the energy capital of the, energy capital. They're talking about moving to a hydrogen hub and creating hydrogen hubs. I don't know anything about the oil field or energy field at all. And I still have to understand how that applies to economic development. So I have no problem being able to sit down and learn, sit down for 8 hours trying to learn as much as I can so that I can understand how this affects economic development. But oftentimes you just cannot do that because you have other things you have to do. So it's like I end up finding it's very funny because I end up running into a lot of INTPs in my field, especially when it comes to the energy field. And they always have, I don't know if you have this the same view, but they always have the same view, this viewpoint of, wait, you understood that? You understand what I'm saying? And I'm like, yeah, keep explaining. And they're like, no, I try explaining this to anybody and they just never understand it.
That actually segs very nicely into my next question, which was, how is it that ENTJs, when they talk, they seem to be able to command a huge amount of respect and people listen to them? And when, I talk, I feel like it's very difficult for other people to listen to me, even if I'm saying essentially the same thing as what you're saying. Why is that? How do I fix
Well, I mean, it's legit the direct versus the informative. And I think what tends to happen is we don't explain very well. Like, but in the same vein, we explain very well. I know that sounds weird, but we don't explain in depth. We give an overview. And I think a lot of times people prefer the overview instead of being in depth. Whereas we don't like the overview at all. We prefer people who are in depth, but it's like we're not the type to be able to explain something in depth. Does that make sense? Like I want you to explain something to me in depth.
Right. You want,
but I just don't think most people want that.
Depth. You that's what you want, right? You want things explained in depth. So it sounds like you want TI. But what you put out into the world is TE, which is the overview, which is probably what TI needs, because TI needs breadth of information. We need that fire hose of information. And that's basically that's this nice virtuous cycle of TE and TI, which sounds like what you've described.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting and I've learned very well is FE Inferior is really good at taking feedback. Most TI users don't like to take feedback, but FE Inferior can take feedback very well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can explain this. The explanation is one, firstly, our TI is optimistic. Actually, by the way, I completely agree with whatever you just said. And I wish other TI users were more took feedback better, because I find that difficult myself to get other TI users to take feedback. But from my perspective, I want to work alongside somebody else to construct the best TI model. I don't care if I'm wrong. I don't care at all. I just care about reaching that conclusion. And I just see myself as a neutral vehicle. I don't hold any attachment to this model. I'm just like, I want to get there. I don't care how we get there. How about we work together to get there? Let's do this together. Whereas other TI users I feel like they have some personal attachment to things, and they do want to feel that they are right. Of course, I want to feel like I'm right too, but like I feel like I just by nature, I'm okay being wrong, because I can catch up. I can get up to speed with new ideas quickly, and I'm like, okay, I don't care if I'm wrong. Just tell me how to change, and I'll change. I can get there quickly. So we can just get there. You know what I mean?
I think that's interesting, because that's an interesting segue into, I want to say that's your TE Nemesis, right?
I don't know. Can you expand on that?
So my theory would be extroverted thinking Nemesis would basically look at the viewpoint of, for me, right? So I have TE Hero. I want to be right. Like it's a sort of like a little bit of a aggrandizement for myself to be right. Whereas from your viewpoint, it's like, I don't want to be right, or I don't care about if I'm right or not. I want to make sure I'm accurate. And I'm thinking, is that from that TE Nemesis basically saying, if I feel like I'm being aggrandizing, or if I want to be right all the time, then I'm going to possibly miss out on the information that could actually be accurate?
I think it's basically about being accurate. So it's like, if what I believe is wrong, why should I keep holding on to that viewpoint? Why should I keep holding on to the viewpoint and defending it? That's just wrong. You know, why would I do that? Like, it's fine. Who cares? I'm wrong. All right, fix it, and then I'm right, and that's fine. And I feel like a lot of problems in the world is people holding onto or latching onto points that are wrong when they could just change. And like, I don't actually think the world would judge you so badly if you just change your viewpoint to be more accurate. Like, the world has a short memory, so why not just change and just be accurate? But what is, I think you were talking about Nemesis, right? I feel like that's a nice seg, to go to the Nemesis stuff. Yeah.
Because that sounds very much like you have no pride to it. So that's an interesting thing, because this is something I had to learn from TI Nemesis, right? TI Nemesis, it can be rough. And I mean this, it can be really rough. Mixing TI Nemesis with FI Inferior is basically like, not only am I not good enough, I'm not smart enough. And what it took for me growing up to kind of get over that worry about TI Nemesis is just basically saying, you know what? You don't want to be wrong, so don't be wrong. Learn. And so that's basically how TI Nemesis worked. I started having to process things on my own. And it was like, okay, well, if I get bad information and I give it out to people, whereas you might not have a feeling to it as far as, oh, I was wrong. Okay, out with that, in with the new. For me, it actually holds a little bit of a ego, a little bit of my ego to it, because it's like, if I'm wrong and I gave out wrong information, I feel as though people look at me less than, or they would not be willing to listen to me after this. And so I make it a very strong point to say, is this right? Is this accurate? Even when I'm reading different things, I sit down and I really ponder and think about it in the same way you're doing, like, so easily. I have to do that, and it takes me a lot longer, but I try to do that with all new information I get so that I can understand it for myself, just in case it is, just to make sure it is sound reasoning and logic. Because if I don't, I run the risk of being wrong and having to pretty much take that ego hit.
I feel like you have a better grasp of how other people think of you, so you feel like you're able to negotiate or like figure out how to like manage your reputation, which I think is great, because I feel like my personal philosophy on this basically like doesn't even care about what other people think. So I don't know if this is an INTP thing or whatever, but let me add to that. My philosophy is that don't be so attached to like how intelligent you are or you are not, because I feel like that's just like a genetic thing. And you know, most people are not smart, most people are not stupid. That's a self-evident statement because most people are average. That's a self-evident statement. Yeah. But it's like, okay, maybe I'm, not that smart. Okay, then I should just, or maybe I'm 80% this, 90, whatever. It doesn't matter. I just focus on basically gathering knowledge and like being accurate or whatever. And it's like, there are always going to be people smarter than me. Like, that doesn't matter to me that much. I try to put my ego aside. Yeah. I mean, by the way, just a bit of context. I'm in a PhD program, and basically I'm surrounded by like lots of extremely intelligent people. So it's not just my personality, but also due to my training and real life stuff, I had to come to terms with the fact that maybe you might be the most stupid person in the room, and you have to learn to deal with that. And this is sort of how I learned to deal with it.
It's interesting because what you were describing, so like I completely agree with you. Like, but it took me, like you're saying that that's how you kind of always thought. And to me, it's like I had to get there, I had to grow into that. Because from my viewpoint, it's like it doesn't matter how smart you are, because are you ignorant or are you not, right? Like, if you know, no one's going to know everything. It's not possible, right? And so all we can do is learn. That's all we literally are able to do on this earth, is learn. And once you come to terms with you're never going to know everything, and you should not feel better than another person for knowing more than them, then it opens you up to actually being humble and saying, oh, you know what? Instead of me thinking about it from a viewpoint of, do I know this? I should be thinking about it from a viewpoint of, how much do I not know? So let's go and actually learn more. So I find that I prefer to be in rooms where everyone knows more than I do, because that means I'm going to learn way more, and I learn it oftentimes way faster than most people. So by that time, I'm going to be able to pull from every single person in there and grow.
That's really interesting, because you were saying about like not everyone knows something, right? Not every you can't know everything, so you shouldn't judge people based on how much they know, because you can often bootstrap somebody or onboard somebody onto a topic. If you do it the right way, and you can do it fairly quickly. And I feel like it does not make sense to hold yourself above somebody and say, okay, I'm superior to this person because I happen to know this thing, because it's gatekeeping. Because I bet if you took like 15 minutes to teach that one thing to that new person, they will get it, and they'll be on the same page as you, and life will be so much easier, and everyone will be on the same page. Unfortunately, the way the world operates is that people gatekeep information, ridiculous, like proprietary information, through copyrights, through patents and regulations, and that's the formal stuff, but even informally in real life too. And it's like the way that information is just like siloed makes for an extremely inefficient society. It's horrendous. Unfortunately, Not everyone in the world
Interestingly,
is ENTJs or
I
INTPs. They
would
don't have this opinion. So, the world runs amok with bureaucracy and inefficiencies. But,
give a pushback
society.
to that. And there's interesting, and the only reason why I would give a pushback to that is I think it's easy to say, oh, you know what, bureaucracy, silos, as far as gatekeeping on the information. It's so easy on the surface to say that is, that makes no sense. But from my viewpoint, it shows, because I told you I'm a huge point of I'm always about the theory of conflict. It shows the importance of information. If everyone was able to spread information consistently, not only like the internet age, right? You can have good information and you can have really god-awful bad information. And so that gatekeeping of information, though it does have a lot of pretentiousness to it, it does work in society as it acts almost as the cleanser of bad information. Because oftentimes, yes, no one likes the bureaucrat that feels as though because they've spent their entire life learning about one subject, now they feel like this is my subject, you don't get to talk about it. But that same bureaucrat is also the individual who understands the value of that subject and won't allow for that subject to be tainted by individuals who are wrong. So it's a give and take.
You're saying that there is a sliding scale between knowledge curation versus completely uncurated, unrated information.
Yeah.
Okay. I agree with this, that there is some, I guess I'm talking about it on a more informal level, in terms of everyday informal interactions.
Mm-hmm.
On a macro scale, yeah, there's room for experts. Experts should exist. But I do feel like on a micro, everyday scale level, that type of inefficiencies are, it's not that great. It's not just inefficient. In terms of social interactions, I think it can be a bit unpleasant. But anyhow, what is TE Nemesis? From my perspective, I feel like I often over-explain things to people because I'm not sure if they get it, and I over-explain to people, and it ends up being informative. That is one example of TE Nemesis. It's like over-explaining. And then generally it ends up being that, of course they get it, because whatever I was explaining was simplified enough, so it's not a big deal. But in terms of the Nemesis and the hero are often referred to as like right hand and left hand, dominant hand and non-dominant hand. And I really like to use TE because in certain situations, when I'm with TI users, because TI users get into an echo chamber and they're often building these castles in the sky that are very intricate structures, but they may not be on a foundation of correct facts. Yeah. And I find that TE is a really great tool to insert in conversations with TI users you don't say like, you're wrong, I'm right, but you just say, the statistics in this show that, and then you say the statistic, and then they recalculate and reconsider in their mind, and then they're like, well, maybe I wasn't so right, and then they change their mind. They will never admit they're wrong, of course, but they will change their mind. So, mission accomplished using TE.
It's funny because I would say the same thing with TI Nemesis. And my viewpoint from TI Nemesis is, if you're not willing to hear everyone's reasoning, then you often can be locked into a logical stream that was inaccurate from the premise. And so oftentimes I see that happen a lot with TI users, where it's like, everything you're explaining is true if you're in this situation, but we're not in this situation. We're in this one. So from TI Nemesis, it's like the internal viewpoint, right? Okay. So for me, it's like the way my TI Nemesis tends to work is, I don't like to rest on my own understanding of things. And the reason why is because if you're only resting on your own understanding of something, you run the risk of always being caught in an echo chamber that you created for yourself. Right?
Okay, so
So
I guess the question is, my question is, are you shadow or subconscious focused? And if you're shadow focused, how do you use that nemesis? Like if you're in your INTP shadow, I don't know what your focus is, but.
So interestingly enough, I'm actually, I'm subconscious focused. I'm
Okay.
ISFP, but I do go into my unconscious very often. I'm pretty developed, so I find myself in my INTP side very, very often. And so for my when I'm in my INTP Nemesis side, I am looking, or my INTP side, I am looking from a viewpoint of this, the same way you, literally the exact same way you explained how you, when your car broke down, it's the same way for me, where I'm looking for all of the possibilities and then how can I solve this through those possibilities. If I do it this way, this is the outcome. If I do it that way, this is the outcome. If I do it this way, it's the outcome. And I kind of do that in an it gets really exhausting, but I do like to do certain things like that. Like for me, there's this game and it's that I play a lot, and it's called Team Fight Tactics, and it's very NE focused. It's very, very NE focused. And I try my hardest to make sure that I'm thinking of every single scenario and remembering all of the things that I need to do, because if I don't, you easily lose. And so that's kind of how I kind of give my INTP side a little chance to play. Any critic. What's the best way? So there's two ways to talk about it. There's the immature any critic and the mature any critic. Any critic, when it's immature, basically just looks at all of the possibilities in the most negative way possible, right? It makes it very, very, very hard to have sound relationships with people in any capacity, just because you're always looking at it from a point of view of how are they going to basically fuck me over. And it's not something you do in a mind state of like, oh, it's, I'm just gonna do that, they're just gonna do that. It's just in the back of your mind, because from my viewpoint, it's like everyone has the choice, right? You have a choice to do whatever you want to do. So if a person wants to bring me in, or they want to stay loyal to me, they obviously are getting something out of it. There's no way you cannot just say I want to be with a person without getting something in return. Any nemesis tends to try and figure out what that in return is, but it doesn't necessarily do it in a healthy way when it's immature. When it's mature,
I see.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, when it matures, it turns a lot more responsible in the aspect of, instead of looking at what's the negative of these possibilities, you look at why is it wise and what are ways to avoid these possibilities. And so I often find it with any nemesis, I'm often find ways to understand who I actually need to be hanging out with and who I need to keep close to me versus who I don't.
Does your any nemesis apply primarily to people, or does it apply more to, say, work or things or concepts?
I would say it applies to the world. And I know that's a weird way to say it, because it's like everything I do, even every concept I make is world driven, right? So it's because I have SE child, it's always how does this work in the world? And the world has so many different aspects to it, whether that be people, whether that be work, whether that be sports, fun, anything you can do. So my any nemesis really applies to anything external in the world.
So Madeline has an interesting point that any critic sounds the same as any nemesis. How's it? I want to just put a brief answer out there. I think that any critic is probably harsher and more distrustful of other people and quite a bit more negative. Any Nemesis may worry about things and they're like, okay, the world might be this way. How do I'm really worried about the world, but maybe it's salvageable. Maybe I can fix this somehow. But any critic is just like really harsh. Would you say that's the right thing?
I would say it depends on the person, because it depends on what that person's been through, right? So if a person's has kind of had a harder life, any Nemesis is going to be, or any critic will be so much more critical than, say, someone who might have had a very, not so much distrustful life.
Mm-hmm.
And so from someone who, let's say it's me, I have not been hurt that many times. I've not been done wrong so many times. So my any critic is, it's rough, but it still gives people the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's one thing that the critic function should do for across everybody's critic function, is learning to give yourself the benefit of that doubt, is where I think the critic function goes from immature to mature. How would that sound for like an I critic with that, in that premise?
Actually, that's fantastic. That's okay. That's fantastic. I find like the transitions. Anyway, I think our transitions are very good because I'm thinking about the exact same thing. But yeah, and you mentioned that the maturation of the critic function is about becoming less critical, because the critic function is like this super sensitive filter. It's like a very fine sieved filter that filters out too much of the good stuff. But you want to relax that a little bit. And for anti-critic, this often is me being stuck in maybe what is known as a TI-SI loop. Often overthinking things, not really going out much, just following the same daily routine, like my physical routine, just going back and forth between work and home and things like that. And just kind of saying things like, it wouldn't be responsible of me if I took this time to learn this other hobby. I should really be doing these other things. I should really be doing work right now. I shouldn't do these other things. Like it's not the right thing to do. It's not socially responsible. And then I end up sort of neglecting a lot of other things that I want to do. There are a lot of things I want to do. NE, okay, so like there are like 10 different things on my list of things to do. But it often takes a long time for me to get to them, if I even get to them at all. And I always find rationalizations for putting off my hobbies. This group is different, by the way, because I can just obviously go throughout the day just randomly commenting, and it takes like 20 seconds of my time to push a comment or whatever. But for larger, more time-consuming things, I tend to put that off. Yeah, actually, so in your personal life, would you say, do you use NI drafting your personal life for your development, maybe hobbies or relationships of that kind? Do you have like a clear goal in that sense? Because I do not at all. I have no clear goal.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that, because what you just said is exactly how NI parent works, except what's the best way to put this? From my viewpoint, you learn what you want, right? And so for me, I want happiness. And so I am a firm believer in, you need to do whatever makes you happy, regardless of the amount of responsibilities on it and everything. But here's the kicker, because that's from my NI parent. But the only things that can make me happy are things that are responsible. So it's not like I can just go out and have an amazing time all day long and I would be happy. I won't. Or I can go and spend money willy-nilly and be happy. I won't. So that's how kind of NI kind of works. Like, I know what I want, because in the same light, I know exactly what I don't want. I know if I go and, spend money on this concert ticket, it better be something that I really will enjoy. Because if I feel like I walked out of that and didn't enjoy it, I'm going to feel as though it wasn't responsible. And so I'm not going to be happy.
I find that very interesting because I also try to take the responsible path most of the time, and I have a conscience, maybe or maybe not, but I have a nagging conscience, not in terms of like FI or FE whatever, but in terms of like what should I do? What are the expectations of me? What does my job expect of me? What does my parents, my society, what do people expect of me? And I try to match those requirements, except that oftentimes that involves suffering. And I derive, and I do not, and I'm not like, oh, I'm doing this for happiness, or happiness is the end result, or happiness is the process. It's like, suffering is often just part of living in society, and people just have to accept that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, that's my life. So.
Not interesting, because I always tell that to SI users is you got to take the good with the bad. Like every good experiences and bad experiences are both experiences, and if you don't have the bad experiences, how can you ever enjoy the good experiences to the fullest?
Exactly. In the interest of time, we shall move to the next function, which is the trickster function.
The tricksters.
I want to wait. One comment on SI Critic. I find that when generally you maybe you just repeat. Actually, you know what? How about you say it? I don't want to take away from you. So how about you just say it? Say whatever you want to say about that.
So from SI Trickster?
Yeah.
We don't remember anything.
Oh, you don't?
It's like not our fault. I really mean it's not our fault. It's SI Trickster is basically like, what's the best way to put this? You go through life not realizing you're going through life. That I don't know how to, like, that's exactly how it is. We don't actually understand the importance of the experience.
Mm-hmm. You don't understand the importance of the experience. Okay. Actually, what I was going to say about SI Trickster is, I feel like when ENTJs or ENFJs approach a problem, they will spend like 1 or 2 hours on it, and they will become very, very visibly frustrated that they couldn't solve the problem. So if you had to dice an onion before, dicing an onion is not an easy task. And I feel like if an ENTJ and ENFJ, well, firstly, they have SE, so they're probably going to be better at it than me. But if it were, something along those lines, they would try it maybe once, twice, and then they would just sort of get very frustrated about it. But I do find that if an INTP is there, they can sort of calm down the ENTJ and ENFJ, just be like, it's fine. It's fine. Your tears are because of the onion. It's not because of the pain. So just calm down and let's just try this again. And I'll probably have like 10 onions because I predicted that it would take 10 tries to dice the onion properly. So I would take each onion and I would try to be like, okay, let's try this technique. Let's try these 3 different techniques and let's try to get the best way that works for both of us. And I won't stop until we diced the onions in this example.
That's funny. I never even noticed that. Like, I never even noticed that was a thing until you said it. But then I thought back and I'm like, yeah, the most annoying thing in the world for me is when I don't get it. Because it just takes so long.
That is the expression of SI Trickster, is this, that is SI Trickster.
It takes so long. And I think what bothers me the most about trying to, like, I tell people all the time, I have zero endurance to doing something that I don't want to do. Like, if I don't want to do it, if you can't get something out of me that I really don't want to do, I must find it really, really important, because I just don't like doing things that I don't enjoy. I just don't.
That's okay. I will do those things for you. You know what I mean? I'll do those things.
How is SE Trickster?
I feel okay. I bet I will give you one definition, and then you'd be like, "That's not SE Trickster. You don't know what you're talking about. It's actually this thing." But which is kind of what I did for SI Trickster. But for SE Trickster, most of the time, it's literally just, I don't know how I'm coming off. Like, I've given like talks or presentations, and I film, and a few times I filmed a video of myself giving that presentation, and I look back at that video, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, is that really who I am? Is that like, I suppose it applies to this video as well, but like, even if I watch this video, I'm like, what? Why are you doing this? You should have spoken louder. You should have not done this thing. This is so basic. Like, why have you? Honestly, I don't know how I come off the way I dress. It's like somebody threw a laundry basket at me and a few things stuck, and I left the house. And it's basically SC Trickster. Oh,
I've noticed
a really hard time making eye contact with people.
You know what's funny? Because I feel like you gave me an example of my SI Trickster. Let me give you an example of SE Trickster.
Yeah.
That INTPs often do. INTPs, I've noticed this, and I can tell when anytime like I go out and I see an INTP, you guys have a very hard time understanding how to be engaged in a group. What I mean by this is, let's say everyone's having fun, like, and it's something that's very enjoyable, and I know that person will enjoy it. Somehow, y'all have this kind of an issue where you kind of just completely detach yourself from the group and start just enjoying the time on your own and not even realizing you do it. Like my cousin, she's an ESFP, and she dates an INTP, and he goes out, and we'll go out, and we'll talk, and he'll be in the middle of a conversation, and we'll have it's a great conversation. He's very interested, and then we'll the conversation will end, and he'll just pull himself over to the side. And I don't know if y'all just go into like your own little world, or if you just like enjoy something, you pick on something that you enjoy, and then from that point on, it's like we have to it's almost like I have to snap you out of it to bring you back into reality.
Very interesting. It's interesting in the same way that it was interesting for you, as in that now I recall that whatever you said is true for me. I just did not know it was a problem, but I suppose it is.
It's interesting because it's not even that it's a problem. Like, most people probably just find it like very endearing. Like, oh, it's like he's enjoying himself. It's just something I'm pretty sure you just don't know that you do.
So, I mean, let me give an example. I mean, for FE reasons, like, I don't take out my phone when I'm in a social thing with people. I don't take out my phone. But I feel like an example of SC Trickster might be like just going away and looking at your phone and looking at memes or something in the middle of a conversation. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. Or like another, I think what's interesting is you can tell from like the social aspect, you know all the social rules. Don't take out your phone. Make sure that you're at least talking to, if somebody wants to talk to you, make sure you're having a full conversation with them, things like that. I just think that the moment that you're not almost engaged with someone else, if somebody else isn't engaged with you, you can just pull yourself to the side and it's like it's just blind as day. It's like, oh, they're in their own little world. And everybody then wants to, I don't know why extroverted sensors do this thing where they're just like, ooh, I want to go talk to them because they're in their own little world. Let me go into that little world with them. I don't know what it is, but it's an SC thing.
So okay, so I can tell you why. Okay, I can tell you why this is, and I will ask, I suppose, for tips, right? For example, there's a group conversation, and let's say the conversation often deviates. There are often times where it's maybe 5 people, and it splits into 2 people and 3 people talking their own something, or maybe I don't know it's a little hard for me in a group conversation because basically the more people that are, the more superficial the topic gets. And I feel like I find it harder to engage the more people that are. Like, I feel like extroverts are able to operate the more people that they are. And they know how to modulate the topic of the conversation to match the mood or to match the number of people. Whereas I feel like I'm fine one-on-one, it's fine, but we could never talk about these type of topics if it was a 10-person video call. And it would never happen. You would probably be able to manage that much better. But I have a hard time doing that, and I basically would disengage a little bit because I'm like, maybe I'm just like, I'm not really interested in this. It's like, I don't care about this conversation, so I just sort of sit back and like, maybe it's a dinner, so I just sit there for like 2 hours, not really saying, just like sit there for 2 hours and not say anything.
I think it's interesting
in such a scenario?
Because what you just, like, you literally broke down the conversation, like how conversations are into systems, right? And interestingly enough, that's how I view, like, everything you explained is already how I look at conversations. Like, we have the same viewpoint on how a person should converse in the proper system. I think what tends to happen for me, it goes back to that topic when you were like, well, I have a hard time being able to give the viewpoint because I can have very, very deep conversations, or conversations that have a lot of depth with a lot of people, but I know how to kind of pull back on the amount of information when it comes to the topic to match the amount of people who are there and their ability to grasp and comprehend the information itself. So,
do you
for
like
example,
that? Do you enjoy that? Is that enjoyable to you? Do you like or prefer that mode of conversation with 10 people, or do you prefer it with, say, 1 or 2 people?
I can do it either or. I mean, I enjoyed the conversation itself, regardless however many people are there or not. So it can be between, like, this conversation was very enjoyable with just one.
Yeah.
If I had this same conversation and all of the people who are on live were actually here talking, it's the same thing. I would enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a difference. It would not be enjoyable if there were 10 people here for me. Like in a 10-person Zoom call, I'd be quiet. If it's a 10-person Zoom call and if it was social, I would not be talking. I would be blowing up the text chat and responding to what people verbally said and just replying in the chat. And I've done that like quite a few times. Because I find it hard to physically have my voice be heard. Sometimes it's literally just like I physically have difficulty projecting my voice or wording it in a direct way that will translate into other people's brains in a group setting, because it's a language. It's as though I'm sort of missing it. I'm speaking social stuff as like a second language, and I'm missing that. So it's like speaking second language. The more people there are,
I guess that's interesting to say, because like, say if we were having that conversation, there was 10 people and you had something that you did want to say, I don't know, I'm really, really, really good at pinpointing like individuals who are getting spoken over and being able to completely direct everyone's attention to the individual who's speaking so that they can have their floor and their moment to express. And not only that, be able to deter all questions. Like, let's put it this way, I can lead the conversation if need be, to kind of give you your avenue to explain yourself in the most comfortable way. In fact, but what's interesting is majority of the time, most people would think I'm an introvert because during most conversations, I'm quiet as a church mouse. Like, I don't need to, and it's not like, oh, I'm afraid to speak or anything like that. It's just many times I don't need to. If everything is going very well, it's like I'm directing from the background.
I mean, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate when ENTJs and ENFJs do that. 100% appreciate that. Because suppose if it's people, background types that are together, or background types, or I forgot what my quadra is. What's my quadra? The what's our
The alpha quadrant.
alpha
Yeah.
quadrant. If it's all those people in a room, people will not do what you're saying of giving people a platform, giving them the appropriate limelight, and like managing when it's the time to move the limelight, like a, I don't know, stage manager. I don't know what the analogy is, but yeah, I really appreciate that sort of thing, because yeah, that's what I would say.
I would think of it, it's like almost like a conductor of an orchestra. Like everyone's saying something at the same time, or everyone's playing something at the same time. And to be able to make it sound good, you have to make sure it's in sync. And I think that's how conversations go. And I get very annoyed when conversations are not in sync. Like if there's someone who keeps speaking over others, or if someone's speaking very loudly while everyone's very quiet, things like that really piss me off, because it's like I can't. It's being able to match the synchronicity of the conversation really, really helps with the interest and the engagement of the knowledge.
I really liked basically your entire philosophy and everything you said, except that for me, I probably just leave the conversation, whereas you're able to conduct it. Like I just find it really interesting, like how you're just like you take such a strong interest in like I didn't even think about it until you said that, but like I'm just like, yeah, that is totally true. Just managing the flow of conversation, the flow of information, and like how you said like ENTJs often appear as introverted. I don't get why people are like ENTJs. They maybe I get it, but you know, people do say, you know, ENTJs are arrogant or whatever and all this stuff. And it's like whatever you said just now is like the complete opposite of that, because it's not like you're hogging the limelight. It's that you are conducting the conversation. It's almost as though the conversation is bigger than yourself, and what you're trying to do is orchestrate the best symphony of knowledge, if you will.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, the last function,
the demon.
The demon. So, okay, so I'll go first with this one. I mean, what is FI demon? I mean, so I want to comment on this misconception that INTPs are very unemotional and all this. The thing with the demon function, I think, is that INTPs actually feel a lot of very strong emotions. It's just that they're maybe come out at an inappropriate time or whatever. But like your morals, like compared to an ENTP, we have much stronger moral convictions than ENTPs. ENTPs, what they will do is their ethics will be completely situational. You put them in room A and room B, and depending on the people in the room and the interests of people in the room, they will act completely differently, and they will completely switch their moral perspective. I would not, totally not true for me. I have my own principles about what needs to be done. You know, I will try to have that done as best as I can. Maybe it's overcompensating. Maybe it's overcompensating. I don't know. But I do have strong feelings, but this often come at times of like great stress or things like that. And it will come out explosive. Well, so this is interesting. I what I've learned through TE or whatever it is that I've known other INTPs that explode with emotion in front of other people, and that never goes well. Like 100% never will go well. And I don't think I've ever done that, thankfully, because I know it never goes well. But normally it will come out in like maybe I send an extremely long email to somebody or write something to myself, but I'll send it to like somebody who like is okay with it, or to like somebody that's close to me or whatever. But it will just be like some insane rant or whatever. But then 1 or 2 days later, I'll be totally okay. But that appears to be what the demon is. And as long as you keep the demon chained to the pole, give it a long chain so that it can do its thing as necessary, but if you keep it chained, I think that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think you said something that was really interesting, because you talked about in the beginning about how you say you're not the type to falter on your moral stance at all.
I would say I have fairly strong principles compared to an ENTP or ESTP.
Mm.
Yeah, for sure.
The reason why I say that's interesting is because I often feel the exact same way when it comes to extroverted feeling demon. My ethics are so tight in comparison to my morals, which I would say, like, from FE Trickster standpoint, like INTJs or ISTJs, they're like, maybe I feel like being ethical today, maybe I don't. And I've noticed that a lot. And it's like, for me, it's like, no, FE demon is very, it's almost like it judges other people's ethics as if it's wrong or not. And I know this sounds weird, but it's like, for me, I often see, like, say, like, high extroverted feelers. I really do appreciate what they bring to the world. I appreciate it a lot, and especially when it's good. But when they tend to use that extroverted feeling for more personal reasons, and I've noticed that they can do this by understanding how to properly manipulate someone's emotions, understanding these are the patterns that can cause this individual to feel good today or to feel bad, or if they were in a bad mood, this will make them feel better. I don't personally believe that that is the right way to utilize that function.
Mm-hmm.
Because from my standpoint, it's a person's feelings is who they are, right? Maybe they did have a bad day. It's up to them to also understand how to control those feelings and how to know what to do when you are feeling that way. Your actions are very important. It should not be left in the hands of another person. So from my FE demon standpoint, you can, just like you said, keep it on the chain. I personally keep my FE demon on a short leash because I know how FE demon comes, especially from a direct individual. People ask me all the time, how does FE demon show itself? It's like, imagine you're on a bridge and FE demon is just like constantly, the bridge is constantly shaking, constantly shaking, constantly shaking. And I'm like, okay, this is a rope bridge. I finally get off that rope bridge, but say someone else is behind me. The person who's shaking it was behind me. I just burn it.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? We will never speak again. I'm going to tell you exactly, because I know how people feel. I know very clearly how people feel.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't like to utilize that in the conversation at all. Like, I don't like to manipulate that to maybe make them feel better or feel worse or whatever. Because to me, it's like, okay, now that we know how you feel, how are we going to address it?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times, many people, they don't like that, especially higher extroverted feelers, because in their mind, it's like, when I feel good, then we can talk about why I felt this way. And it's like, no, it's how you felt at that moment, and being able to control that's the most important thing. But if you ever push me to a position to where you're saying, like, say, like, if a person says I'm uncaring, that pisses me off very, very fast, because it's like, the reason why I'm doing all of this is because I care about you. And I'm not going to be here 24/7 for when you get mad or when you get upset or those things. But you're going to be there. You are going to be there at every moment of at every moment in your life. So being able to master and control your emotions is important. So let's figure out how we can do this. Let's look at the rational perspective. What are you thinking about at this moment? What is your viewpoint? Why is it that what happened there upset you? Let's address those things. And oftentimes that gets looked at as kind of being heartless,
Right.
because it's like, why aren't you empathetic? And I'm like, because why should I be?
So
You're gonna maybe. Hmm?
I have a question about that. Do you think that's just because that's your preference, or do you think it's also because you may not be very well equipped to deal with FE situations? Let's say you were forced to use FE. Do you think you probably wouldn't, it would be very difficult for you to actually do it if you were forced to do it?
It feels very, very uncomfortable.
I see. Got it.
And let me elaborate on that. It's not just that it feels very uncomfortable, it feels ungenuine.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm doing it, which I've realized extroverted feeling often comes off, often is ungenuine.
Oh yeah, agree with you.
Yeah, like extroverted feelers tend to not care at all about what a person might be going through, but they know how to make sure that that person feels good after. And it's really weird to me.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. Definitely really weird. The way that I use it, it's more of a defense mechanism so that FI users won't crucify me. I mean,
Yeah.
high FI users won't crucify me. It's just like apologizing, making sure to, hear people out, things like that. But that's mainly how I use it, more of a defense thing, not to make people feel good. I do not really use FE to make people feel good. Oh, well, I do, but it's more just that I feel like that person needs it, so I just sort of say
Give them
something.
a little nudge.
Because I feel like some FI, well, actually all FI users, I feel like I need to say something if they're like, somebody's feeling down. Okay, so if somebody comes to work and says, I'm feeling really terrible, I'm feeling really bad today, it's like a cue. It's like I should say, well, I hope you feel better, blah, 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 blah. And to me, in the inferior function, it's just like a very crude mapping from FI problem to FE solution, and just say the thing so that things will be smooth socially. Like I don't want to bother with these problems. I see them mostly as problems that need to be placated or solved. But although I will say that for FI inferior, I feel like I have a very deep. I feel like FI inferior problems are real problems. They're not like fake problems. I feel like some other higher FI problems are just like fake problems that need to be defended against my work. I need to work here. They're giving out these problems. So the FI inferior, I feel like they're real problems, and I'm like, I can appreciate those problems. But
Interesting.
yeah,
That's interesting because I've always said, FI, most people don't know FI is the caring, it legitimately is the caring function, right? So the reason why it's the caring function is because it has the ability to not care, right? So prime example, if someone comes in and their feelings are hurt, and I don't care about you particularly, like I don't know you, or if you might be just a coworker, that's cool. I'm just like, okay, shrug shoulders. And I feel like extroverted feelers have a hard time being able to do that. But if it's someone I care about, if it's a friend, a close friend, or it's my girlfriend or something like that, and they're having a really bad day, I am very inclined to understanding why they're having a bad day, so that I can understand their feelings a little bit more. But I do agree with you in that I feel like if I use like ESTJs and ENTJs have real problems, not just I was in a bad mood today. Or if we are in a bad mood today, like sometimes, like I said, it goes back to the very beginning of the conversation where I'm like, sometimes I'm just not feeling good today. It might be for absolutely nothing. But I don't want to put that on anybody. I just don't care to put that on anyone. So I don't want a person, like if I woke up on the wrong side of the bed today, I'm not trying to make it your problem too, for no reason.
that's the second time you said that, and I haven't said that. Actually, I did want to say, 100%. I haven't heard somebody articulate it in that way in the recent times, but I 100% agree with that. That people need to take responsibility for their own emotions, because let me tell you, there are some types that will completely disagree. ENFPs are one type that they will tell you the exact opposite thing. They will tell you, I will say something, and if you get offended, that is your responsibility that you're offended, not mine.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no. And it's so refreshing to hear your take on it, because, oh my God, this turned into an echo chamber, but I basically agree with you 100% on that philosophy.
It's interesting how ENFPs and ENFPs and ESFPs, as they mature, they come to that same conclusion too. Like, I'm in charge of how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually when they're younger is when they struggle to understand, and they kind of put that viewpoint on it. And it's mostly because of FE Critic.
Yeah.
But here's my best way of saying it. A person should apologize because they feel bad. A person should never apologize to make the other person feel good.
Yeah, I don't apologize to make other people feel good. I apologize so that they won't cut my head off.
I understand. Yeah, I understand that. But I mean, just as like a moral stance, because I feel like that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Is a lot of times people are quick to just say, "Oh, I'm sorry," because it's like your feelings got hurt, and sometimes people have valid reasons for their feelings to be hurt. But you won't, if you know that valid reason, if they're willing to be able to understand and vocalize and explain that valid reason, and the person is a decent person, they should be able to understand that. Or at least understand their perspective, even if they don't necessarily agree, be able to understand their perspective on it.
Yeah, I can see that. Normally, if I've done something wrong and I feel like, I really did something wrong, I still apologize, but I guess I still apologize, but I suppose if it's a personal relationship, you should apologize. But I generally just care about fixing the problem or fixing whatever the issue is in a pragmatic way. So the apology is nice, but I feel like I just do that, and then the next step is trying to fix whatever the problem. The problem.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Whatever it is. So
I am the exact same way. I was like, let's figure out the thing that made you mad, so it won't make you mad anymore.
Exactly. All right. I think in terms of time, I'm out of time. And I think this has also been a very good arc in terms of us covering the 8 things in order. That was a great structure. And we are also at 9 viewers. Been at like 9 to 10-ish viewers pretty consistently over the past hour or so. So I'm actually very proud of that. And that's great. You end on a high. People are dropping off now. So we're going to end on a high. And it was really great talking to you. This is totally spontaneous, but this was fun.
Yeah, I really appreciate you reaching back out and having this conversation, because I think that this was something that was very enjoyable, and it gives people an opportunity to understand both INTPs and the ENTJs very well.
Indeed. And with that, we will end our stream here. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And I will read through the comments afterwards and reply. Thank you all.
Thank you.